Let's get it. 580 Sports Talk coming at you on a Tuesday. So glad you're along for the program today. Lots to get to. The Pac-12 has a media rights deal proposal, but really the only outcome of their big meeting today was the decision to have another meeting. That doesn't bode well. We'll talk about that. The trade deadline is less than 2 hours away. In fact, the Royals have just announced a transaction, but not that kind. They just reinstated Matt Beattie from his rehab assignment, and they've promoted Angel Zerpa from AAA. He'll join the big club. So, a couple of transactions, no trades today, or nothing in the last few minutes that Jake Fulton didn't get to you on Mic'd Up. But we're less than 2 hours away from the trade deadline. We will be keeping track of what, if anything, else the Royals do. We'll talk about what they have done. And we will talk about what they did not do, but apparently seriously considered more than you might have expected. And that is trading Salvador Perez. Definitely want to get into that, as it sounds like there were some talks that ended up not really going anywhere, but that the Royals were at least willing to entertain the idea of trading their captain. Lots of MLB trade deadline stuff to get to today, not just the Royals. It's been a fairly lukewarm start to the day, but again, we've still got an hour and 51 minutes. Hour and 52 minutes, excuse me. So still plenty of time for things to happen. Justin Verlander going back to Houston from the Mets is obviously the headline deal of the day. But if anything else happens, we'll have it for you, and we'll make the most sense of it that we can here on 580 Sports Talk. It's a jam-packed day. We've got some great guests. Glad you're along for the program, whether you're listening on 580 WIBW, online at 580WIBW.com, FM 104.9, of course. And if you're checking us out on the YouTube stream, hello to our YouTube watchers, youtube.com/@SportsOn580. SportsOn580 WIBW is the name of the YouTube account where you can watch this show and all of our live and archived streams and videos. I'm Dan Lucero. Again, I am solo this week. Brendan Dworzinski is on vacation. He'll be back Monday. But I'm not entirely solo because Kyle Manthe is across the glass as our producer for today's program. You'll hear from Kyle a little bit later on. And like I said, we are jam-packed today. We have lots to talk about. We're going to talk trade deadline. We're going to talk as the Pac-12 turns. We have two great guests lined up today. Michael Swain of Fog.net, 24/7 Sports, join us at the bottom of the 4 o'clock hour for Jayhawk Weekly. And a lot has happened since the last time we talked to Michael Swain. For instance, the Big 12 has 13 teams. So that's one thing we're going to talk about. And maybe they'll have 14 or 16 by the time we talk to Michael. Who knows? But we'll get Michael's thoughts on Colorado returning to the Big 12, get his reaction to any of those other rumors. We'll talk about KU basketball getting ready for their Puerto Rico trip, and KU football already starting to fill in their recruiting class of 2025. So lots to get to with Michael. Look forward to having him visit as he does every week on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits hotline for Jayhawk Weekly at the bottom of the 4 o'clock hour. Then at 5:25, it'll be our second training camp report with Mitch Holthus, the voice of the Kansas City Chiefs. Those are brought to you by Hy-Vee and Zurich Credit Union. Today we hear from Patrick Mahomes. And I'm excited to talk to Mitch about Mahomes and get his insider perspective on what he's seeing, what he's hearing from the Chiefs quarterback as this camp gets underway. So that's coming up at 5:25. Also, all of the segments that you've come to know and expect and maybe even love from 580 Sports Talk, our sports headlines, top of the 5 o'clock hour. Start a new month of What Is Wrong With You. 2 news stories to compete at about 4:20 or so. This hour, we'll do some Random Question Tuesday. We will read your texts on the air. If they are good texts, we will read them. 785-272-9429 is the text line number. So get those texts in. Also comment on the YouTube stream if you're in on the stream today. And we would love to hear from you. But again, however you are consuming today's program, we appreciate you doing so. Thanks for dialing in to 580 Sports Talk. And we began with the latest news from the world of conference realignment. And let me tell you, I thought there might be like real news today, like a real big announcement. I was out to dinner with my wife last night, and we were in between the appetizer portion and waiting for our main course. And I happened to pull out my phone just to check Twitter. And I saw that Brett McMurphy of the Action Network, one of the most tied-in college sports reporters there is, had tweeted simply the eyeballs emoji. You know, the two eyeballs wide open. I'm doing my best to simulate it on the YouTube stream, and wide open eyes looking. That was all Brett McMurphy tweeted, and that broke Twitter. Not functionally broke Twitter. That's what Elon Musk is doing every day. But no, that sent Twitter into a tizzy, particularly the folks who have a vested interest in what college sports realignment might look like. That is the universal symbol, the wide eye emoji for I know something, or ooh, what's that? Or I see something, or I'm hearing something. And I had to apologize in the moment because, you know, when I'm out to dinner with my wife, I try to not be on my phone the whole time, not to compulsively check it like I might if, you know, I was sitting at work and compulsively checking Twitter to see if something was happening. But I told Abby, I said, hey, look, I'm sorry, but something might happen, it feels like, with this tweet. And I'm going to have to be like in tune to it. So I apologize if I'm grabbing at my phone a little more often than I would generally like to be at dinner. As it turned out, nothing happened last night, and nothing really happened today either, it seems like. We knew going into yesterday, as we wrapped up yesterday's show, we knew that the Pac-12 presidents and athletic directors were going to get together and have a meeting today, and that Commissioner George Kliavkoff was going to present some numbers, was finally going to do the thing that he had been promising to do, that the Pac-12 had been certain that he would do, and that kept not happening for the past, gosh, what now? It's the first day of August. So 5-6 months? We've been waiting for numbers. We've been waiting for something concrete from the Pac-12, and it's never materialized. And it got to the point where they've already lost a team to the Big 12, but all of a sudden, 72 hours after all that happened, we were supposed to have numbers, real numbers from George Kliavkoff today. Well, there were numbers. They weren't good. Ross Dellinger was first to report. He was the first I saw, anyhow. There may have been some reporting from closer Pac-12 sources. But the first tweet I saw was from Ross Dellinger, Yahoo Sports. Pac-12 presidents and ADs, as expected, met this morning and were presented with details of a TV deal, sources confirmed to Yahoo Sports. Executives left the hour-long meeting with no agreement, but with the expectation of eventually concluding a deal. Another meeting is planned soon. You can infer a lot from the conclusion of that. I don't know about you folks. I don't know individually, listener to listener, what it is that you do for a living. But I imagine that some of you work in jobs, whether they're office positions or other kinds of positions, where you have to have meetings. And if there's a really important meeting and the end result of the meeting is the decision to hold another meeting, typically I would assume that means things are not good. Things are the vibes are horrendous. If the end result of one meeting is, we got to go have another meeting. There was more from Stuart Mandel. If you were hoping for a neat and tidy resolution to Pac-12 media rights today, no dice. The board was presented specific deal options, including dollar figures, but there was no vote yet to approve something, according to a source with knowledge of the discussions. Again, what can we infer? If there's no vote on approving something, even though something has been presented, then it's either not in any way acceptable or people need more details, so it's too opaque. There's not enough in stone with this. This is all still very abstract, even though, again, months they've had to try and put something concrete together, and they haven't gotten there. But no vote. No vote. Why might that have been? Well, Pete Thamel went on ESPN earlier today and finally gave the details that the deal presented today involved Apple TV Plus as the primary media partner of the Pac-12. That is streaming as the primary TV distribution and not the linear over-the-air TV distribution. And that there would be licensing of some of those games, sub-licensing of games on Apple to a network like ESPN or Fox, who would pay to sub-license these broadcasts. And the money involved? Well, this is what George Kliavkoff now is in the position of trying to sell the remaining 9 ADs and university presidents. Well, it's not a great figure now, but you, yes, you can make it better. If we sell enough subscriptions to Apple TV Plus, there is revenue sharing that would allow us, the Pac-12 conference, to beat the money per school, the dollars per school that the Big 12 is getting from ESPN and Fox, that $31.7 million that we've talked about. So there's a hard number, somewhere in the $20 million range is what's been widely reported. And then the idea is that there will be revenue sharing from the total subscriber dollars that Apple TV Plus gets, that people pay to Apple TV Plus for the Pac-12 package, so to speak. So if you're not familiar with how this works, maybe you have Apple TV Plus, maybe you do, maybe you pay for it, maybe you share somebody's password. I'm on my parents' Apple TV Plus. I'm not gonna front with y'all. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I'm on my folks plan with that one. I don't know how much it costs. I think it's like $50 a month, but I think it is about to go up. Anyway, Apple TV Plus, it's just like any other streamer. You pay a monthly fee or you pay an annual fee, and you get all of their original programming and whatever it is. But they also offer right now on Apple TV Plus, that's how you get the MLS. Okay, Major League Soccer. All of the Major League Soccer broadcasts, instead of being on ESPN Plus or MLS League Pass or whatever their version of League Pass was called, now you just subscribe to Apple TV Plus. You pay an extra fee on top of what you're paying Apple TV Plus. So it doesn't come with your initial subscription so you can watch The Morning Show or Ted Lasso or whatever it is. You have to pay something else on top to get the MLS. You can also get the MLS if you don't subscribe to Apple TV Plus, but you have to pay more for it. Essentially, that's what the Pac-12 is looking at. That they would also be ancillary programming for Apple TV Plus that you could purchase a subscription for on top of your existing Apple TV Plus account for a lower fee, or you could pay a larger fee if you don't subscribe to Apple TV Plus and just get the Pac-12, the Pac-9, Pac whatever they're going to be. If that makes your eyes glaze over, look, I don't blame you. The details of all of this are not real exciting to talk about. Where it gets to the point of absurd is the idea that there is enough revenue to be generated in these incentives for selling subscriptions to Apple TV Plus presents the Pac-12 to make these schools, particularly these schools that care about their athletic departments, Oregon, Washington, Utah, Arizona State, even Oregon State and Washington State, I would throw in here too. Schools that care about their athletics, is there enough in incentives out there? Can they make enough money selling subscriptions? Like it's going door to door and selling magazines. And if you sell 1,000 of them, everybody gets a pizza party. Brett McMurphy laid this out on Twitter. Biggest blowback on Pac-12's possible primary Apple media rights deal with incentive bonuses is it's, quote, very challenging for schools to accurately budget annual revenue, sources told Action Network. Another Pac-12 meeting scheduled to discuss further. So that's where they are. SEC is swimming in TV money. The Big Ten is swimming in TV revenue. The Big 12 not making as much as those other two conferences, but got a solid and stable and significant linear presence in their TV rights deal. And those schools are making $31.7 million. And do you know what's different between that and then hoping you get there from $20 million, hoping you can sell enough subscriptions amongst fan bases that are almost entirely regional, and B, not the diehard fan bases that exist in these other conferences. In the Big 12, you have fan bases who are going to be willing to spend money on whatever they've got to do to watch their team on television. You had diehards. You had diehard K-State fans. They heard about ESPN Plus. They said, all right, well, I guess I'm paying for ESPN Plus. And the thing about paying for ESPN Plus is you pay for just ESPN Plus. You don't have to pay. You're not paying for ESPN Plus and then paying for Big 12 now. You get everything with ESPN Plus. It's not something on top of something else that you're paying for or might not want to pay for. It's, hey, you're going to have a few basketball games and maybe a football game a year and all of your Olympic sports, and it's $6.99 a month or whatever ESPN Plus is now. I've been paying with the Disney bundle, so I have not kept track of how much the ESPN Plus price has gone up or not. But there it is. It's take it or leave it. And because, again, you've got diehard fan bases in the Big 12, they'll pay for it. And that doesn't factor into how much more money your schools get. It's all part and parcel of the media rights. Now, you've got Oregon and Washington, depending on Cal and Stanford fans, or Arizona State fans, or Utah fans, or Wazoo fans, or whatever it is, buying these subscriptions to Apple TV Plus to float their athletic departments. See, when the MLS tried to do this with Apple TV, they didn't have a great success at first of getting people to sign up for the service just to get the MLS. But do you know what changed that? One guy, one little Argentinian guy changed that whole equation. Lionel Messi coming to the MLS made the MLS something you had to watch if you were a soccer fan. It made it something that appealed to you even if you were not maybe in an MLS city. And as it turns out, Lionel Messi's getting a cut from the league of some of those subscription revenues. Just a way to make him whole financially too. Because they know that's where you're going to get a bump. Where's the Pac-12 bump? What is going to be the thing that the Pac-12 does that gooses their subscription numbers on Apple TV to the point where what they are making is competitive with what the Big 12 schools are making from their media contract? Because that's been the talk. We're going to be comparable to the Big 12. The Pac-12 has been certain for months they were going to beat the Big 12's revenue. They were going to exceed $31.7 million per school. And now that's only going to happen if you sell X amount of Apple TV subscriptions? I can't imagine that's going over well in Tucson. I can't imagine that's going over well in Salt Lake City. I can't imagine that's sitting well in Tempe right now. And I can guarantee that it's not going over well in Eugene and it's not going over well in Seattle. The idea that their athletics budget may fluctuate on a year-to-year basis based upon how many people are subscribed to watch them on a streaming service. It's not palatable. It doesn't work. And I can't imagine the Pac-12 recovers from this. Now, it makes perfect sense why George Kliavkoff didn't want to be public about numbers, didn't want to talk about who they were negotiating with, why they've kept everything so close to the vest for so long. It's because this was the best they had. This was, and a texter described it in these terms, and it's a little overwrought, but I don't think it's wrong necessarily. It's a little of an exaggeration, but it's apt enough that today was D-Day for the Pac-12. There had to be something that George Kliavkoff brought the presidents and the ADs that made everyone there feel secure in the future of the conference. And telling them that, hey, you better set up some kiosks outside your football stadiums and start selling some subscriptions. But if you do, you can make more money than those suckers in the Big 12. If you sell the most subscriptions, you get to pick out some goodies from the catalog. If you sell the most subscriptions, your market will get a pizza party. That's the model. That's the last gasp from George Kliavkoff in the Pac-12 today. That's the best they've got. And it's not good enough. I can't imagine it. We know Oregon and Washington are dying to get out, but I can't imagine that satisfies the ADs and the presidents at the Four Corner schools. I cannot imagine a scenario where they look at $20 million a year plus incentives if you sell enough subscriptions. Because you've got a very limited geographic footprint in which to sell said subscriptions, even if you do add teams, even if the Pac-12 were able to add San Diego State or SMU or Boise or whatever. You've got such a limited footprint to sell these things because you're not selling them. Who's buying Pac-12 on Apple Plus east of the Mississippi River? Is anybody? It's just amazing that that this is what it's come to, and that this was the best that George Kliavkoff could deliver his presidents and ADs today. Was a subscription-based revenue model where you might have fluctuating revenue. Running an athletic department, as it happens, kind of expensive. And it's valuable when you're running an athletic department to have some certainty in your numbers, to know what that revenue number is going to say year in and year out, and not hope that there were enough households in Eastern Washington signed up for Apple TV Plus to allow you to come in at a number that is satisfactory. And look, this is not, I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know. Everybody knows this. Jedd Fisch, who's the head coach at the University of Arizona, their football coach, he was speaking at Arizona Football Media Day today. And most of the questions had to do with conference realignment. And one of the things he said, and this was tweeted by Michael Lev, who is a columnist and a senior writer for the Arizona Daily Star. Jedd Fisch on what's best for Arizona regarding the Pac-12 versus the Big 12, quote, stability of wherever we land, plus financials. And Fisch noted that running an athletic department is extremely expensive, so the media deal is extremely important. Everybody can see the writing on the wall. The Big 12 is going to expand, and I don't know what becomes of the Pac-12. It becomes Mountain West Conference Platinum, or I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for them. I hope the conference doesn't die. I hope it doesn't harm athletic programs in Pullman and in Corvallis that desire to be competitive, that I've enjoyed in various forms, watching on television, compete at the highest levels in major college athletics. But I can't imagine the conference stays together. And I got to believe that Brett Yormark is probably just waiting, just sitting by the phone and waiting. I don't know when that next meeting for the Pac-12 is going to be, but I suspect things are going to happen very, very fast once that final meeting is held. We're going to take our first break here on 580 Sports Talk. When we come back, we're going to play a little Random Question Tuesday. Kyle Manthy's going to join us across the glass, and we'll do a little Random Question Tuesday. That's coming up next. We got so much more to get to. We're just getting started on this edition of 580 Sports Talk. .335 on 580 Sports Talk. Welcome in. Dan Lucero flying the plane solo this week with Brendan Dworzinski on vacation. He'll be back on Monday. Kyle Manthy is across the glass, and he joins us for a little round of Random Question Tuesday. First one, Kyle, in the spirit of Apple TV Plus perhaps being the only suitor for Pac-12 games on television, streaming or linear, which streaming services do you currently subscribe to or pay for?
If we're counting ones that I'm receiving from other people, like parents, like yourself, then I think I have pretty much all of the main ones covered. HBO, Netflix, Hulu, Apple.
Which one would you say you watch the most?
If I had to pick one to keep, it'd probably be HBO.
Max?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what are you watching on there?
I mean, Righteous Gemstones just ended on Sunday.
So I haven't gotten a chance to watch finale yet. The 2-part finale. But
I'm halfway through it.
Okay, that is I'm gonna knock it out tomorrow. That is absolutely one of the best shows on television right now. So good.
They have the best quality of shows, in my opinion. They're not as much quantity as Netflix, but highest qualities on HBO or Max, as I guess they want to be called now.
Sure. I have we again, and there's lots of sharing that goes on between family members, both on my wife's side and on my family's side. But I think the only one I actually break off the check for is the Disney bundle. Oh, Paramount Plus too. But that might be on the chopping block. They're raising prices. There's nothing on there I watch like regularly, other than the Premier League, not the Premier League, the Champions League soccer, and every now and again, like they've got the NWSL, so I'll check out a current game. But I don't know if that's worth $7 a month. That was worth $5 when I started. I don't know if I gotta reevaluate that extra $24 a year, man. I don't know.
Yeah, I have access to Paramount, and it just completely was not in my mind when I was naming them. That's how little I use it.
No,
so.
yeah, it's pretty low on the list. That, and we don't go to Amazon Prime a lot, but there's a couple shows that we've enjoyed on there. Do you have a random question today?
Yeah, let's get really random. My question for you is, if you had to pick any of the the big four sports, and you had to wear those uniforms going through one day of your daily life, which one would you choose?
Okay.
We've got football, baseball, basketball. We'll throw hockey in there too.
Okay. So just with hockey, do I have to wear skates?
Yes.
Okay. Well, then that's obviously out. Okay. No chance. I don't think I could walk on skates, even if you had like the guards on them and walk through the parking lot on skates. Absolutely not. Plus the long sleeves, so are you just saying the uniform or all the gear? I have to dress in full gear for a whole day and go about. That's a fun question. So yeah, hockey and football are obviously out. That's just too much. Too much gear. Like, you can't carry all that stuff. You can't have all that stuff on.
Would it change your answer if there was no gear included?
No, probably not. I think I'd still be out on football because, again, the pants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the pants aren't real flattering. Baseball pants. I used to be told they were flattering, but that wasn't my opinion. That was the opinion of others, whom I appreciate very much. I have to go baseball, and the reason I go baseball over basketball is basketball. I got the tank top, and I'm not a tank top guy. I don't have a tank top body. I'd have to be like one of those guys from Georgetown in the 80s to go with the t-shirt under the tank top. Not many guys do that in the NBA these days. You got some guys with like the compression sleeve here and there, but not a lot of t-shirt under the tank top devotees in the NBA.
It is always a very tight compression shirt. If you can get away with the t-shirt, I would easily choose basketball. If you could just have a t-shirt under the jersey, then that's easily my choice. If not, I'd probably still go with basketball, but it'd be a little bit closer.
Yeah, like the ability to wear shorts is nice.
Mm-hmm.
That is nice. And then if I have to wear the shoes, and does that mean I got to wear? I kind of miss wearing them. I don't know. Did you play baseball at all?
I did for a little bit.
Okay. Did you ever play with and wear the metal spikes?
I didn't have metal spikes, but those wouldn't be comfortable walking around in all day.
Not particularly, but there are lots of things I miss about playing ball, mm-hmm. and one of the things is the crunch that the metal spikes make on the concrete. Yeah. Just that kind of clackety crunch that they make. I miss that. I miss that sound. I could do that. I could go for one day. Yeah, give me the spikes. I'll do the. Can I wear high socks? Can I dress like a baseball player? Right,
yeah, whatever you want.
Okay, perfect. I don't have to wear like the pajama pant legs. I can actually show some sock. Yeah, definitely a baseball. Definitely much more at home in that.
It can even be a random weather generator. It doesn't have to be 110 degrees out. You can have 70 degrees.
Okay.
Even
Yeah,
better.
and you can do that in 40 degrees too easier than basketball. Basketball, I'm not a fan of. I can do short sleeves on a cold day, but I like my legs to be toasty. So long pants have an appeal if it gets a little chilly. So that is a very random question. Good stuff. That's Random Question Tuesday here on 580 Sports Talk. We will take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk later in the show about the moves the Royals have made and moves the Royals may still yet make with an hour and 19 minutes before the Major League Baseball trade deadline, until the trade deadline, I should say. But one move they're not going to make but explored is interesting. They almost traded Salvador Perez. We're going to talk about that when we come back here on 580 Sports Talk. .345 on 580 Sports Talk. Coming up in the 4 o'clock hour, Michael Swain's going to join us at about 4:40 or so from fog.net, 24/7 Sports. It's Jayhawk Weekly on the program. Michael's thoughts on the start of fall camp for KU football, the Puerto Rico trip for basketball that's coming up, and so much more. Michael Swain of fog.net for Jayhawk Weekly. Coming up in the 4 o'clock hour. Also, first, what is wrong with you for the month of August is coming as well. The Major League Baseball trade deadline is now an hour and 15 minutes away. Of course, when the clock strikes 5 o'clock Central Time, it doesn't mean we're done hearing about trades. There will be some that sneak in right under the wire and get reported 10 to 15 minutes later, like the Royals trading Jorge Soler to the Braves back in 2021, for instance. But the Royals have not made a trade today. We're going to break down in the 4 o'clock hour the trade they did make last night and another transaction that they made this morning, bringing in a left-handed pitcher from the Angels by the name of Tucker Davidson. I've got some thoughts on what the Royals have been up to in the last 24 hours. But it seems like something else that they've been dealing with as the trade deadline approaches is taking offers, serious offers, for their captain, Salvador Perez. John Heyman tweeted just 4 minutes ago, Salvador Perez would consider waiving his no trade clause for the right contender. At different points, the Marlins and Padres checked on Perez, and also the White Sox, according to Joel Sherman. He's of the New York Post, who tweeted earlier this afternoon about the Chicago interest. He wrote, Royals entertained offers for Salvador Perez. Not completely dead, but very unlikely he is moved. Marlins had interest, so did non-contending White Sox, owing to relationship with manager Pedro Grifol and team control through 2025 with 2026 club option. I have been consistent in saying that Salvador Perez isn't a player the Royals should trade. I think it's very difficult to sell your fans on your vision for your team when A, you're 32-75, and B, you are trading the guy you just made the team captain back in spring training. If Salvador Perez is important to this organization, then he's important to the organization. Then keep him. Then let him be a leader. Let him be an example. Let him be the guy who's done the thing that you are hoping that this young group of Royals one day can do. Play meaningful games in August and September. Win a division title. Win an American League pennant. Win a World Series. If you think Salvador Perez has good baseball in him and can contribute to a winning team, then keep him. I'm fine with that. I've never been of the belief that you have to trade every single veteran if you are as far out of the playoff spots as the Royals find themselves as this trade deadline approaches. I don't necessarily believe in that. I think that also there's the goodwill factor in Perez being one of the few reasons there is anymore to continue to go to Kauffman Stadium and see the Royals. And to trade him in a year where not only has the team's record taken a giant step back, but also you've got what is becoming a bit of a dispute between ownership and Kansas City, the city, and the counties surrounding as to where a new stadium might go. Does you some good to have a player like Salvador Perez, who's popular, who's beloved, who's still a good player, though perhaps no longer able to get to his best. He's going to be a 5.5 win player ever again like he was in 2021? I don't know about that. Can he still be a 2 to 3 win player? This year he hasn't been, but I think he's been dealing with some injuries that he's trying to play through. One thing about Salvi, he's a proud player. And he wants to be in the lineup and he wants to help the team. He doesn't like sitting out. Respect that about him. I think he sets a great tone for this young Royals team. I think there are compelling arguments to keep Salvador Perez, and I have made those arguments. But also, the flip side of that is, if there is a team willing to make you a good offer, and I don't just mean like a good offer, I mean the the offer you can't refuse, the Godfather offer for Salvador Perez. If you are able to bring back talent that you can't transform your farm system in one trade, but if you can meaningfully bolster what might be the worst farm system in baseball, then you do yourself a disservice if you don't listen. And that's what the Royals have done. They listened on Salvador Perez. It sounds like there were some discussions. It sounds like there were some teams that were interested, understandably so. The Padres, gosh, they're hilarious. The way they lost in Denver last night has to be seen to be believed. They had the bases loaded with nobody out in the top of the 10th inning and did not score and lost to the worst team in the National League. They're still going for it, though. Like the Padres made additions earlier today. They traded for Rich Hill and G-Man Choi from Pittsburgh. They checked in. The Marlins, who just in the last few minutes here have added Jake Berger from the Chicago White Sox in a bit of a surprise trade. The Marlins could use a bat, could certainly use a catcher. If those teams are willing to make you a good enough offer that you can't refuse, then you have to listen. You do your team, you do your organization a disservice if you don't listen. If you just say, we're not trading Salvador Perez and that's that, now you have to listen on that. But at the same time, if your value of Salvador Perez, if the value of Salvador Perez to Kansas City goes beyond just, the 0.5 wins above replacement he's generated in this season, which it's on pace to be the least productive season, at least when it comes to that, in his major league career. But if his value to you, if you're the Royals, goes beyond that, and I think you can fairly state that it does, then play hardball, get the offer you can't refuse. If you don't, keep him. That seems to be the direction that they're going. But I thought that was interesting, that there wasn't a lot of real speculation surrounding Salvador Perez until about 2 hours ago. And then all of the major baseball writers were weighing in and saying, actually, yeah, there were some discussions. We are going to talk about what the Royals did do in the last 24 hours, what they still might yet do with an hour and change left before the deadline. We're going to get to that in the 4 o'clock hour. Your comments on the YouTube stream are always welcome. Your texts as well at 785-272-9429. That's the text line. Got a text regarding the Pac-12, which we talked about at the top of this hour, how their proposed TV deal appears to be primarily streaming and not near enough money, an incentive-based TV contract. Had a text from the 785 that said, Pac-12 Saturday nights are some of the best games to wind down with really cool teams. They're fun teams they could add in Western markets. In my opinion, a big issue for the Pac-12 is not utilizing potential recruiting blueprint they should have out west. They have a big presence in those areas. It just could be better. I think the biggest issue for the Pac-12 is that their best football program is leaving the league. And their biggest media market is leaving the league. Their biggest presence in one of the biggest states in the union is leaving the league. And that's just not something you're going to be able to adequately replace. And I think the Pac-12 thought that they could. I think they thought that their brand was strong enough with the schools that they had. And I think they did think that they could get comparable TV money to the Big 12. But it's become more and more apparent that that's just not there. And now George Klevikoff is telling his members, no, that money is there. You just have to sell a bunch of Apple TV Plus subscriptions and hope that all your other member schools do too. That's fake money. The same thing happened with the Pac-12 network. They were promised they could get big money based on subscribers, and then the money never matched what was proposed. And it wouldn't match it here either. That's going to do it for this hour of 580 Sports Talk. When we come back, what the Royals have done the last 24 hours, what they still might do as the deadline approaches, plus Michael Swain of Fog.net, and what is wrong with you. That's all coming up on 580 Sports Talk. Let's get it. Hour number 2, 580 Sports Talk on this Tuesday afternoon. Hope it's been an outstanding Tuesday for you all so far. Thanks for tuning in, whether you're listening on 580 WIBW, FM 104.9, online at 580WIBW.com, or on our YouTube video stream. Hi, guys and gals on the YouTube stream. YouTube.com/@sportson580. However, you're consuming the program today. Sure am glad you're along for the ride. I am Dan Lucero, hosting solo today and this week with my sidekick, Brendan Brzezinski, on vacation. That's not reductive to call him a sidekick. He call me the same. That's, we're like Crockett and Tubbs. We're like Starsky and Hutch. There's no lesser. There's no lesser of us. It's two equals. It's Bert and Ernie, So that's my guy, Brendan. He's on vacation. He's out. So I've got the hosting duties solo for the remainder of this week. Kyle Manthe is across the glass as our producer for today's program, and we are now inside of an hour left before the Major League Baseball trade deadline. There have been some moves in the last little while. Jake Berger going from Chicago to Milwaukee, kind of a surprise. Jake Berger, young player, kind of player you thought maybe the White Sox might want to try and build around moving forward. Nope, he's on his way to the Marlins. Andrew Chafin is on the move, the left-handed reliever with the NASCAR mustache. He's headed from Arizona to Milwaukee. Eduardo Rodriguez was heading to the Dodgers. At least that's what the Tigers and the Dodgers hoped, that the Tigers would swap their best left-handed starter to the Dodgers. But Eduardo Rodriguez has a no-trade clause, and the Dodgers are on that list of teams he can veto a trade to, and he vetoed the trade. So the Dodgers are going to have to look somewhere else for starting pitching help. So a lot is going on, not a lot going on at the moment with the Royals. But again, 52 minutes left to make a move. The Royals have done a couple of things in the last 24 hours that I think are worth discussing. And I'll get to those here in this 4 o'clock hour. We will also welcome in at the bottom of the hour, Michael Swain of Fog.net, part of the 24/7 Sports Network, for Jayhawk Weekly. We do it every Tuesday at the bottom of the 4 o'clock hour. We'll get Michael's thoughts on the latest in conference realignment, the start of fall football camp, and basketball is getting ready to go on that Puerto Rico trip. We'll talk about that as well. We'll cover as many bases as we can cover with Michael on Jayhawk Weekly. And, of course, this hour we'll have a What Is Wrong With You, the start of the month of August. We are already to August 1st. This year has flown. So we'll have 2 new stories competing on our first What Is Wrong With You of August. Love to hear from you on the text line, 785-272-9429. And you can comment in the YouTube comments if you are watching on the stream. Mark adds to my list of equal sidekick duos, Cheech and Chong without the drugs. That's definitely true. That's a very apt description of Brendan and I. Thank you for that, Mark. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in on the YouTube stream. Thank you to everybody, again, listening to today's program. Again, this is the final day, the final hour before the Major League Baseball trade deadline hits. And so you never know. It's kind of exciting to be a fan, and it's kind of exciting to do a sports talk show on a day like today when something might happen any second. You don't know what that's going to be necessarily, and you might be stunned. You might see something flash across Twitter that make you fall out of your chair. I don't think I'm going to fall out of my chair literally, but we're going to be keeping an eye on things here in the next 50 minutes. But to this point today, Scott Barlow is still a Kansas City Royal. Edward Olivares is still a Kansas City Royal. Ryan Yarbrough is still a Kansas City Royal. Carlos Hernandez is still a Kansas City Royal. So not a ton of movement from the boys in blue to this point today. But, as I mentioned, they've made a couple of moves in the last 24 hours that I think are worth discussing. We'll go back to last night. The Royals sending right-handed reliever Jose Cuas to the Chicago Cubs in exchange for outfielder Nelson Velasquez. If you've ever watched Netflix, I think this is Netflix that does this. Like when you watch a show on Netflix, and after you've watched that show, you might be scrolling the menu looking for something else to watch. And then it says, since you watched whatever, since you watched Sweet Magnolias, that's what my wife is watching on Netflix these days. Or at least that's what she wants to get started watching. They got a new season of the show that she wants to watch. So since you've watched whatever, and it shows you a list of shows that are kind of like that show, that are similar, that you also might enjoy. It's the algorithm at work, right? And you get it on every piece of software that we use to consume media. If you listen to music on Spotify, once you're done listening to an album, the algorithm will play you some songs it thinks you might like. It either knows you like them because you've played them a bunch, or it thinks you might like them because it's a similar artist or a similar sound. You know how the algorithm works. Nelson Velasquez, who the Royals acquired in a trade for Jose Cuas from the Cubs last night, he is what comes up on Spotify after you've listened to a full album of Edward Olivares. He is the answer to, since you enjoyed Edward Olivares, here's Nelson Velasquez. Very similar players. Olivares is 2 inches taller, 6'2" to Velasquez is 6 foot. He's also 2 years older. You're talking about two outfielders, big raw power, not real great in the field. Although the fact that Velasquez has played some center field suggests that while he's not a great fielder, he's not the butcher that Olivares can be in an outfield corner. Like, you can't imagine ever the Royals thinking it's a good idea to put Edward Olivares in center field. Like, that's just never going to happen. But someone along the line has looked at Nelson Velasquez and said, well, maybe he can handle center field. So that's the primary difference between those two. But still, we're not talking about great defenders here. There's a little more of what you would call the 3 true outcomes potential from Velasquez. We talked about the 3 true outcomes before. Those are the things a hitter can do that are not influenced by the defense. The 3 things that a hitter can do that have nothing to do with batted ball luck. Walking, striking out, or hitting the ball over the fence. Takes the defense completely out of the equation. Those are the 3 true outcomes, and there is a little more potential for those with Velasquez than with Olivares. He strikes out more, he walks more, and he's hit for a little more power. At least he's displayed that in his minor league career. And so far in his major league career, he's shown a little bit as well. So Velasquez is like a younger version of Edward Olivares. Still young enough that you can see potentially something there, some room to grow, and an opportunity for the Royals to add a power bat to their corner outfield mix, where right now they don't have a lot of powerful bats. Velasquez had played in 13 games for the Cubs this year, carried a 933 OPS in those games, 3 home runs, a 621 slugging percentage. It also struck out in 25% of those 32 plate appearances. And for his career, he struck out in 30% of his plate appearances, 31 if you're rounding up, which is that magic number of if you're going to strike out that much, you better hit for power. You better be able to draw a walk, and you better hit for power. We've talked about that with regards to Drew Waters. We've talked about that with regards to Nick Pratto. Well, Nelson Velasquez, at least early on, has shown that he might have enough power to overcome if he is going to strike out that much. So it's an interesting addition. And I like this move because I think anytime any team wants to give you anything for a relief pitcher, you let them do it. Jose Cuas is a great story. We all know that, right? From FedEx driver to Major League Baseball player. It's an awesome story. It rules. Easy guy to root for. Easier now, maybe, that he isn't on the Royals. Maybe he's not on your favorite team, and you don't have to see the flaws. You can root for the story, and you don't have to actually feel acutely the failures along the way. Because Jose Cuas is nobody's idea of a bullpen stopper. He's quite good against right-handers, but as is the case with many sidearm pitchers, opposite hand hitters give them absolute hell. And that's kind of what Jose Cuas is and what he's going to be moving forward. He's 29 years old, so there's not a lot of not a lot of projection with him moving forward. But he's always going to be a guy that you can run him out there, and if you got a string of right-handers in the lineup, he can do some damage against those guys. But left-handers have an OPS 140 points higher, 136 points higher to be exact, off of Cuas than right-handers do in his 2 seasons in his major league career. So if anybody wants to give you anything for a player like that, take it. Take it and don't ask a lot of questions. And especially when you get a younger player, a player with, I think, more team control than what the Royals currently have. I'm going to double check that Cuas's earliest free agency is 2029. No, it's the same team control for Velasquez. So same amount of team control. No problem with that. Position of need. Royals are a little thin in the outfield, if you haven't noticed. Yeah, you make that move. Relievers are fungible. Relievers are replaceable. The Royals will find another right-hander with a fastball and a slider to plug into the bullpen and have probably similar results. They'll find another one of those. But Nelson Velasquez could potentially help their outfield mix. Makes their outfield mix, I think, a little bit more interesting. And I kind of thought when the move happened last night, made them more likely to seek a trade for Olivares. Now, as of right now, and we are, as I continue to keep an eye on the clock, 42 minutes away from the Major League Baseball trade deadline, Edward Olivares is still a Kansas City Royal. He has yet to be traded. But, my mistake. He is in the lineup tonight. He's actually in the Royals starting lineup. So clearly they think he's going to be around to play against the Mets tonight. But, plans change all the time. I remember one time at the trade deadline, the Rockies sent Ubaldo Jimenez out to pitch that day, and then they had to pull him after 1 inning because they ended up trading him to Cleveland that day. So things can change in a hurry. You don't want to read too much into it, but Edward Olivares is in the lineup tonight. Velasquez, for me, is a younger version of that player. A little more power, a little more strikeout prone, a little better defensively. I'm into it. That's a thumbs up for me. That's good process. I ripped the Royals process in making the Nicky Lopez trade on yesterday's show. For me, trading Jose Cuas, trading a 29-year-old relief pitcher for anything that could potentially be useful, thumbs up. I like that. I'm good with that. Royals also did something else earlier today. They acquired left-handed pitcher Tucker Davidson from the Los Angeles Angels. Davidson had been designated for assignment earlier this week, so the Royals, all they had to do was send over cash. They could have done the same thing and gotten Taylor Hearn from the Rangers for the same cash, but instead waited a week and then took him in the return for the Nicky Lopez trade, which is weird. But at least now we know that the Royals understand procedurally how players being designated for assignment works. Look at them learning. Look at him. Look at the growth. As far as who they're getting with Tucker Davidson, 27-year-old left-hander who has had a bit of a rough go of things with the Angels. He came over from Atlanta last year in the trade for Raisel Iglesias. And Atlanta, I think, was expecting some big things from him moving forward. He was a well-regarded pitching prospect in their system. Actually started Game 5 of the 2021 World Series. You may not remember that, but when Charlie Morton broke his leg in his start, I think he started Game 1 of that World Series, and he broke his leg. They needed an emergency starter, and it was Davidson. They felt good enough about a guy with 21 2/3 career innings to that point to run him out there in a World Series game. Now, he didn't pitch great. He only pitched 2 innings, and Braves ended up losing that game. But still, that tells you how the Braves thought of him. And half a year later, they were willing to trade him, and the Angels really wanted him as the big return in that trade for their closer at the time, Raisel Iglesias. But he had 8 rough starts with the Angels last year. This year had been pitching out of the bullpen for the Angels. 18 appearances, a 654 earned run average. That's the bad news. The good news is his peripheral stats, strikeouts, walks, home runs, suggest he might have been a little bit unlucky. He's given up a lot of hits. Sometimes you have one of those years where it seems like every ground ball finds a hole, every line drive finds a patch of grass. He's given up 44 hits in 31 2/3 innings, but he can't control that. That's the fielding dependent stuff. The fielding independent stuff actually says that Davidson was pitching pretty well out of the Angels bullpen. His fielding independent earned run average was in the mid-3s compared to his mid-6s earned run average. So suggests that there's potentially a corner for Davidson to turn. If he's going to do it, he's going to do it in the Royals organization. I think he's worth the flyer. I am a little concerned about his velocity being down this year across the board. Typically, you see a guy move to the bullpen, the velocity ticks up. That's not what's happened for Davidson this year. His velocity's actually been down a couple miles an hour. So definitely some concern there. But somebody with this kind of prospect pedigree, somebody this well regarded in not one but 2 organizations, even just 1 year ago, I think it's worth taking a chance here and seeing if you might be able to find something and straighten him out. So I'm good with that. Like taking flyers on, I'm not opposed to the broad idea of acquiring there's a term that people in the baseball industry use, the post-hype prospect. Like Drew Waters was a great example of a post-hype prospect, somebody who maybe dominated a lower level of the minor leagues and maybe had a little trouble at AA or a little trouble at AAA, and people stopped talking about them in that like superstar upside sort of discussion. And so their prospect star kind of dims a little bit. And the Royals have specialized in acquiring those players, and it hasn't worked out great for them when they've done it in trades, as we talked about on yesterday's show. Like Taylor Hearn is a good example of this. They traded Nicky Lopez for him. Jorge Lopez and Brett Phillips are great examples of this. The Royals traded Mike Moustakas for them. Edward Olivares is kind of an example of this. Drew Waters, definitely an example of the post-hype prospect. And Tucker Davidson's another example. But this is the way you should be acquiring those guys. Not by accepting them back as trade pieces. You're trading value for these post-hype prospects. No, these are guys that you should be acquiring. You should be buying low on the post-hype guys, not buying with value, not bartering. Buy low on the post-hype guys. I think that's sound. I think that makes sense. That's something you can sell me on. So, a little more positive about what the Royals have done the last 24 hours than I was about what they did in the 24 hours prior. But we're now 35 minutes away from the trade deadline, and all is quiet on the Royals front. Say that Scott Barlow's hanging out with his teammates, playing soccer in the outfield, acting like somebody without a care in the world, maybe acting like somebody who isn't going to be traded after all. Now, he's not a rental player. The Royals don't have a lot of rental players. That's the one thing about them at the trade deadline. They don't have a lot of guys whose contracts are out after this year. I think just Ryan Yarbrough. And he might have a team option. I'd have to double check. But they don't have a lot of rental guys that they can go ahead. Like they've got guys that are under team control. If they don't trade them now, they can trade them later. They can trade them next season. That's not the worst thing, not the worst possible outcome. But at the same time, if this ends up being it, if we're not talking about some other Royals transaction in the next 34 minutes now, then I would have to say that J.J. Picollo did not accomplish what I would have liked to have seen him accomplish at the trade deadline, which was add depth to his farm system. And if that's what ends up happening, then stay tuned. And in the 5 o'clock hour, I'll rip J.J. Piccolo for not adding enough depth to his farm system. I won't say I'll rip him. I'll criticize him. I will be measured in my criticism, but I will be pointed in my criticism that the Royals maybe did not do enough to add to what is arguably baseball's worst farm system. And that would not be good process. But we still got 34 minutes. I'm sorry, check that. As of right now, we still have 33 minutes to see if the Royals do anything else. We're going to take a break on this edition of 580 Sports Talk. When we come back, it's our first What Is Wrong With You of the month of August here on 580 WIBW. It is that time for What Is Wrong With You here on 580 Sports Talk, our first What Is Wrong With You of the month of August, and it is brought to you by Top City Metal Supply. Top City Metal cuts the metal you need, your specifications, saving time, money, and material. Never settle when it comes to metal. Top City Metal Supply on South Topeka Boulevard. Why can't I say the word boulevard, Kyle? What is wrong with me? What is wrong with me?
It's just something about the syllables that just trips you up. You're too excited about it.
Top City Metal Supply on South Topeka Boulevard, halfway between Frito-Lay and Forbes Field. Kyle Manthe, our producer across the glass, going to play along. He's got a story for us from the Great White North. Kick us off.
My story comes from Canada. As you said, we have realtor Mike Rose, who was waiting at a potential buyer's for a potential buyer at a client's home in Kamloops, British Columbia. And while he was waiting, he got thirsty. He decided to open up the fridge of the client's home, and he took a drink out of a milk carton.
Oh, foul. Foul.
Unbeknownst to Rose, the seller had a Ring camera set up for her children in the living room, and it caught him in the act. And after the client discovered the alarming footage, her husband came home. She threw the milk away. He was confused. She's like, I saw him drinking out of our milk carton. It also says that in a different incident, he was sitting on like the edge of the couch, and it saw him break the arm off of the couch, also in their home. And because of this, he was fined 20,000 Canadian dollars, which equates to about 15,000 in United States, and he was suspended and fired from his job as the couple's realtor.
That was an expensive drink of milk.
He was very thirsty.
I don't care how thirsty you are, man. Find a glass. Find a glass. Like, I understand on one hand, people say it's always better to, do and then ask for forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Ask for forgiveness easier than ask for permission or whatever. But no, you cannot drink. I don't care if it's my own milk. I don't drink out of the carton. Drinking out of the milk carton is so foul.
Yeah.
Number one, it tastes worse. I firmly believe that it tastes worse than when you pour it into a glass. Second of all, the germs. Man, not somebody else. Like, you don't know what they do. You don't know if they've been drinking out of the carton. Nah, that's awful. That's really bad. Oh, man. Yeah, he blew the commission, the whole thing. Wow.
Lost out on a lot.
They've got some stats down here at the bottom of this story. A study done at Clemson University in 2009 showed that milk drunk directly from the container has 8 times the number of bacteria floating in it versus milk poured into cups. Where does the bacteria go between the carton and the cup is what I wonder.
It appears though he's not a serial drink from strangers milk carton person. He says he's never done it before. He's going to spend time trying to reevaluate and make sure that this kind of behavior never occurs again.
Man, he must have been crazy thirsty. Even still, like water. Well, some water. Like, put your hands under the sink and like get some water and then like lap at it like a cat. That's a better option than drinking milk from the carton. Man, that's wild. That's a good story. That's going to be tough to beat, but I am fond of my story as well. We are going to San Antonio, Texas, where a man is hospitalized after being shot several times while visiting his girlfriend on the northwest side of San Antonio. The shooting happened around 3 a.m. Monday in a home along Deertail Creek near Culebra Road. Police said when they arrived, they found a man with 2 gunshot wounds to his leg. He told police that his girlfriend called and told him to meet her at her house. When he showed up, a group of men started shooting at him. The men all got into an older model truck and drove off. The same thing happened to him earlier in the same evening. Around 11 p.m. Sunday, his girlfriend asked to meet her near a nearby gas station off Culebra Road. When he arrived, his girlfriend was there with a group of guys who opened fire on him. He was able to drive off without being shot during that incident. Police took a woman into custody. I'm guessing the girlfriend. Hey, man. Fool me once. Shame on you. This man. Oh, well, meet my girlfriend at a gas station. Yeah, sure. That sounds fine. Holy crap. I'm being shot at. I'm lucky to escape with my life. Oh, she wants to meet me at her house later on. Oh, I'm sure that won't happen again. That was just probably a freak thing. It had nothing to do with her whatsoever. I'm sure it'll be fine. I wonder at what point he discovered that his girlfriend had a hit out on him.
I'm wondering if it happened, like if he didn't get shot the second time, would he have gone and done it a third time?
Right?
How long would this have gone on?
How long would this have gone on? Would he have said, man, something's kind of funny, hon. I don't understand. I keep trying to meet up with you and people keep being there to shoot at me. It's so weird. Who are these people? Are you in danger? Nah, dude, you are. I just the slapstick of it. Again, there's a slapstick element to you show up to meet your girlfriend and she's there with some dudes who shoot at you, and your initial reaction is, that was odd. But your initial reaction is not, I should never see this woman again. 4 hours later.
What was the conversation like between that time? Like, I don't know if he saw her the first time he got shot at, and he didn't, maybe, I'm assuming he didn't see her, just like drove away. So like, what was talked about in between those 4 hours? Like, hey, I tried to meet you and I just got shot at.
Yeah.
And she's like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. Yeah,
That's wild.
exactly. Wow, damn. That's, who
I
knew?
didn't even hear that.
Anyway, you up? Yeah, like, yeah, that's what it was. Like 11:15. Somebody just shot at me. Damn, that's wild.
Sorry, I was asleep.
Not even like an "Are you okay?" Just dang, that's crazy. And then at 2:58, you up? Come over and try it again. Like again, there is a what is wrong with you. Obviously, the woman taking out a hit on her boyfriend, but the what is wrong with you, the boyfriend, for going back for seconds. Like all I ever need to be around a person who is surrounded by people who shoot at me is once. I don't need to experience that twice.
It also, I would imagine, can't be easy to round up a group of guys with guns who are willing to shoot at someone. So I'm just wondering if the guy knew that she had like those type of connections when he got into a relationship with her, because not everyone has those capabilities to do that.
No, that's a fact. So we've got to pick a winner today, Kyle. Is it going to be, as Vance called him, the milk mooching real estate dude? We have a text from the 785 that said now the guy has got milk on his business cards, which is very funny. Or do we have the guy who just needs a new girlfriend?
I think it's the girlfriend.
The oblivious boyfriend.
Yeah, the details of that one are a little bit crazier than the thirsty milk realtor.
Yeah, that guy just was thirsty.
Yeah.
Maybe this guy was too, in a different way. But yes, the oblivious boyfriend. He advances to tomorrow. He is our first daily winner for August on What Is Wrong With You. Brought to you by Top City Metal Supply. Metal cut to order when you need it. Top City Metal Supply on South Topeka Boulevard. I did it again. Boulevard, halfway between Frito-Lay and Forbes Field. Michael Swain of Fog.net joins us for Jayhawk Weekly next on 580 Sports Talk.
The goal is to win championships, pure and simple, one day at a time.
That's what made a difference today in the game.
I was hoping that was vodka.
Dollar signs.
Mike. What day is it, Mike?
What a scene in Lawrence, Kansas tonight.
Michael Swain covers Kansas athletics for Fog.net, part of the 24/7 Sports Network, where right now, I believe it's still ongoing, they've got the 24-hour VIP unlock, so you can check out all of the great VIP content that they've got going on at 24/7 Sports. And Michael joins us every week at this time for Jayhawk Weekly on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits Hotline. Michael, a lot has happened in the week since we last spoke. So let's start with this. What are your first thoughts, opinions on Colorado coming back to the Big 12 Conference?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting move overall, right? I think you're looking at this being the first of probably a two-part move to make sure the Big 12 stays, right, at an even number of teams. But I think it's interesting. I don't know if this move happens if Deion Sanders isn't the head coach at Colorado, right? I think you're looking at realignment broadly. It's about football and media rights deals that are really driven by football times. And Deion Sanders has really kind of forced Colorado's hand where they've committed to football there. I think similarly to what you've seen KU do with Lance Leipold, they're doing something very similar there, where they're going to give him the resources and the ability and all the things you need to have success in Power 5 college football. He's getting it. And so I think it's an interesting move. I have concerns about Colorado probably long term if Deion Sanders does indeed move on. Will Colorado still support football like that? But I think for the Big 12 overall, I think just the look of it, right, to poach another active Power 5 school from another conference, I think in and of itself is a big move just for the long-term sustainability of the conference. And I'm sure we'll talk about it when you look ahead too, right, and what could happen with a school like Arizona. I think it's just huge for the sustainability of the Big 12 long-term that they're able to go in and get another Power 5 school to jump on board.
Do you think Colorado will compete in hoops, short and long-term? Do you think there'll be a basketball program that can mix it up? I'm not saying challenge Kansas for the hegemony that the Jayhawks have had over Big 12 basketball for the last 2 decades, but do you think that could be a top-level program and mix in with maybe where Texas Tech has been, where Baylor's been, where Kansas State got to last year? Do you think that's a ceiling for them as they come into the league?
No, I really don't. I think they're probably going to be somewhere along the lines of maybe Oklahoma State in terms of the program, where I think if they can make the tournament some years, but I don't know if they're going to be able to get that sort of sustained success, right? This isn't necessarily even the Colorado program that in the Pac-12 with basketball, it isn't necessarily the strongest, right? It's not like they've, lit the world up there. So I don't have a ton of confidence that basketball is going to be the area where maybe they're able to perform the best in the new Big 12.
I'm going to let you wear Brett Yormark's shoes for a second. In your perfect world scenario for 2024, we know Colorado's already in to make 13. Would you go 14 or 16, and which schools would you prioritize?
Well, the only reason I would go to 16 is if Oregon and Washington show a willingness to join the conference. I think the thing that maybe gets overlooked in some of this is the escalators, right? The pro rata for the Big 12 media deal, where basically if other Power 5 schools join the conference, they get a full share of the media deal, which I believe is somewhere in kind of the low 30 million. And I think that you look at the Big 10, right? That's kind of the conference that's been rumored for Oregon and Washington that they might be holding out for. Well, the Big 10's media rights deal doesn't have that in it. So you're looking at, if those two schools join the Big 10, they're going to split up the pie even more. And maybe the Big 10's not willing to do that. Maybe they want to wait a few years. Well, considering the fact you look at the new reported Pac-12 media rights deal being all subscription-based, I don't know if those schools are going to be able to make it up, and it could become more of maybe a prestige question, right? Is it better for them to stay in the Pac-12 and not make as much money, or to jump into the Big 12 and make more money? But I think maybe from them, from a West Coast perspective, maybe thinking of it a little bit differently in terms of cachet. So I would wait and see what Oregon and Washington want to do, and that would be the way I'd get to 16, because I think it seems like Arizona is going to be kind of next up on board, and I like that. if you look at what Arizona is doing on the recruiting trail, not only in the state of Arizona, but just generally, right? They're recruiting at a pretty good level. And I think Jed Fish is a good college football coach and their program on the rise. So I think that's a good move for them. Basketball, obviously, Arizona basketball is a pretty historic program in terms of their consistent success. So I think it'd be a really good deal for the Big 12 if they add Arizona. I think it's a two-way street there where they add multiple things. And I think from there, that seems likely to get to 14 and then just be patient, right? I think there's a lot of things that can happen. Maybe the ACC starts to fold. Maybe Oregon, Washington show willingness down the road. I think there are a lot more cards that can be played later on.
Michael Swain is our guest, joining us on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits Hotline. This is Jayhawk Weekly on 580 Sports Talk. We do it every Tuesday at this time. Michael covers the Jayhawks for Fog.net, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. You can follow him on Twitter at mswain247. Lots of KU stuff to get to, so let's jump right in. First day of football camp is in the books. Michael, what stood out to you from day one of the 2023 Jayhawk football camp?
Yeah, I think every single time you attend a first day of camp, right, I think your kind of first impression is important. And I think just the size that this team has and the way that the guys look is a lot different than I think you saw last year or even the season before, right, their first season. And I think that's huge because we've heard a lot from Lance Leipold about the physicality side of things and how much they want to improve there. And that obviously starts in the weight room. And it seems like those guys have really put in the work. I think if you go to my Twitter, it would have been on Monday. Some guys posted photos before and after of when they arrived on campus, whether that be January of this past year, last summer to now. And there's some major body transformations that have happened. And when these guys put on the helmets and shoulder pads, you see it too. And so I think that for me is probably the thing that stood out the most. I think listening to the players and Lance Leipold talk today, I think another thing that's really important here is everybody knows the standard at practice and they know what practice is like. It's high paced, it's fast. They do a lot of sessions and a lot of drills, and you need to be locked in during practice. And I think that everybody understands that. And now it's about continuing that standard to now when the freshmen are showing up for their first kind of fall camp practice, they know what to expect. And if they're not living up to that, if they mess up on a drill, they've got older guys there to hold them accountable. So I think overall, really what you're seeing is a Power 5 football program kind of turn into one, right, where it's consistent. There are standards, and everybody knows what to do every single practice, right? You do this drill, this drill, this drill. And I think that's so huge in terms of building really good habits. And I think just continuity is something that Lance Leipold has talked a lot about. And I really do think you're seeing kind of the fruits of that labor start to show up. And it's kind of fun to imagine maybe what it could look like a year, 2 years down the road. But I think just for this year's team, it's a good sign that I think some of the work in the off season looks like it's paying off. It looks like everyone's really locked into having a good camp.
Any injury concerns early on in camp? Sounds like Daniel Highshaw is getting close to maybe being at ramming speed. Any other concerns that might linger on into the start of the season?
Not really. Not in terms of the guys you'd expect to play. Highshaw's one that even going back to spring, right? He was working his way back. Summer was doing the lifting, and now it's going to be continued monitoring of his reps and his workload because he's someone now that has suffered 2 major injuries in the last 2 seasons. And so it's something that really they have to keep a very close eye on, and they will throughout camp. They know what they have in him. And Daniel Highshaw knows the offense. He doesn't need to go out there and get a ton of carries at practice, right? He's a guy that knows what his role is going to be and what it looks like to carry the ball in front of that offensive line. So I think that you look at him being kind of the one that I'll keep my eye on. Outside of that, it's just kind of about generally having a very healthy spring to where guys can really hit the ground running at the start of the season.
How about position changes? Those are always kind of fun to track and see. Maybe some guys are at different positions. They can also kind of be red flags if you've got, say, a linebacker mixing in with the running backs, or you got a wide receiver getting first team reps at corner all of a sudden. Anybody stand out as far as maybe some position switches that might be worth keeping an eye on as the season approaches?
Not a ton. I think Quentin Conley might be one. He's a walk-on wide receiver from the Kansas City area who then made the switch to play tight end. He's one, if you followed his high school recruitment, KU offered him after a high school summer camp. They worked him out as a tight end, gave him a scholarship offer. Injuries happened, and they ended up having to switch to a walk-on. And that walk-on offer meant that he could play wide receiver. And then he did that last year. Now it seems like he's playing some tight end. So he's mixing in there. But outside of that, not a whole lot. It's kind of now just a question of the freshmen, where do they slide in? And Jameel Croft is one that played safety last year at the high school that he was at. And now he's playing corner where they expected him to play. So I think those are really kind of the only two. And outside of that, everyone's where they were during spring practice.
Couple more questions for Michael Swain, KU beat writer for Fog.net, 24/7 Sports Network, joining us on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits hotline for Jayhawk Weekly. Michael, Kansas basketball is en route to Puerto Rico. In fact, I think they're probably already there, as it turns out. They have the next 8 days and 3 exhibition games out in Puerto Rico. Bill Self sounds excited about it for everybody involved, but who do you think stands to benefit the most from getting this opportunity to go play with the Jayhawks in Puerto Rico?
Yeah, I think obviously it's the newcomers, right? I think for me, I look at Hunter Dickinson and the ability for him to feel what it's like to play for Kansas, because even if he's playing the same position, right, he's going to get a lot of post-ups. He's going to be playing center. It's different for KU. They play faster than Michigan, and the Big 12 plays faster than the Big 10. And so I think getting used to that style of play that Kansas is going to have, I think, is going to be a bit of an acclimation process for him. And getting a tour like this is going to be really important. I look at Arterio Morris and Nick Timberlake, right? 2 guys are coming in from the portal at the guard position. They're 2 guys who are going to be competing for that 2 spot. For them, they get to feel what it's like to be in the offense and what Bill Self wants. I think Arterio brings more defensively. I think someone like Timberlake probably brings more proven offensive firepower. And it's a question of, what does Self want? I think if Bill Self, he's going to probably lean defense, right? And what someone brings on the defensive end of the floor. But I think it's a big, big tour for kind of those 3 guys, right? I think those are 3 key members of this team. If they're going to reach their ceiling, those 3 guys have to play really, really well, because I think what you're getting out of DeJuan Harris, Kevin McCullough, and to some degree KJ Adams. But even for him, right, he's going to be playing on the wing more this year. What's that adaptation process like for him, where he's on the perimeter, not playing as a small ball big man? So I look at the 3 newcomers from the portal and really look at them and say, this is a big, big opportunity for them just to get acclimated before they get back.
Last one for you, Michael. The Kansas football program has just received recently its first commitment for the class of 2025. Quarterback David McComb out of Oklahoma is the first member of the 2025 recruiting class. What do early commitments like this say about what Leipold and his staff are building and the foundation they're laying recruiting-wise?
I think it's huge, right? And it's, you asked us on the day when coaches can finally start to reach out to players in McComb's class, the 2025 class, players who are going to be juniors, right? This is a guy that committed without having coaches being able to reach out to him. Like, he's the one that had to call the coaches to build a relationship. And I think it says a lot about his interest in Kansas that he did that. And I think it also says a lot about his talent ability, that the coaches felt comfortable taking this commitment at such a premier position this early, right? Quarterback is, for my money, the most important position on the high school recruiting trail, because anytime any other kid now looks at KU's recruiting class in 2025, they're going to see a quarterback, and they're going to have to wonder, okay, well, what's this guy see that he committed to Kansas so early? And I think that will help Kansas continue to get more attention on the trail. I think as a player, Dave McComb's really solid. Got to see where he develops as a junior, but he's got dual threat ability. He's a good athlete. He's got a strong arm. And he's got really good size. I think he's kind of a complete package type of player. And now it's just a question of, can he continue to develop? So I think you're looking at it saying, if you're going to pick a position to start a class early, I'd pick quarterback 10 times out of 10. And I think it's great that Kansas was able to do it, because now it just kind of gets the ball rolling for this next class.
Michael Swain, Kansas beat writer for Fog.net, the part of the 24/7 Sports Network. You can go to Fog.net today. It's a free VIP day with unlocked pieces of content that are free for you to read. You can also subscribe, join VIP for $225 a month if you check him out today. Michael Swain, you can be followed on Twitter at mswain247, and he joins us every Tuesday for Jayhawk Weekly. Michael, always a pleasure. Thanks for stopping by. We'll talk to you again next week.
Awesome. Sounds great. Talk to you then.
That is Michael Swain. That's going to wrap up this 4 o'clock hour of 580 Sports Talk. One more hour to go on today's program. The trade deadline is now 3 minutes and change away. Are the Royals going to do anything more? Plus, Mitch Holthus joins us in the next hour of 580 Sports Talk. Let's get it. Final hour of the day here on 580 Sports Talk. The 5 o'clock hour on this Tuesday. Dan Lucero hanging out with you on this Tuesday afternoon. Brendan Dworzinski on vacation. He'll be back next week. Kyle Manthe is across the glass as our producer for today's program. We've got one more hour plus a little more. We'll have a little 580 Sports Talk overtime coming up in the 6 o'clock hour, taking you up to Royals baseball. Royals and the Mets. Game 1 of a 3-game series at Kauffman Stadium tonight. First pitch at 7:10. Pregame at 6:30, and we'll have a overtime segment take you to 6:30. Matt Derrick of ChiefsDigest.com, our Chiefs insider, joined Jake and Fulton earlier today on Mic'd Up, and we'll re-rack that conversation, get a little Chiefs talk for you before the Royals game tonight here on 580 WIBW, FM 104.9. Appreciate you listening online as well, 580WIBW.com. We're on the YouTube stream. One more wave for the YouTube streamers, youtube.com/@sportson580. Search for Sports on 580 WIBW. That is our channel. I meant to check the subscriber count today. We're trying to get to 300 subscribers, and we are at 298. Can we get 2 more? Who are the brave souls that will be our next 2 subscribers to Sports on 580 WIBW on YouTube and get us to 300 so that I can take credit all alone, all by myself, for getting us to 300 subscribers? Who will be those brave souls? We appreciate all 298 of you who subscribe. You can hit us up and be part of the conversation on the YouTube comments or on our text line, 785-272-9429. Would love to hear from Royals fans as we start our 580 Sports Talk headline segment. We're going to get through those. Then we're going to talk to Mitch Holthus, the voice of the Kansas City Chiefs, for our second training camp report. He's got some Patrick Mahomes audio to share, and we're going to have a chat about number 15 with the great Mitch Holthus joining us here in about 20 minutes or so, brought to you by Hy-Vee and by Azura Credit Union. But we start with the headlines, and we start with the Major League Baseball trade deadline. And as of right now, and there, again, still may be in the next 10 minutes or so, news of some deals that leak out late. But as of right now, Scott Barlow is still a Kansas City Royal. Ryan Yarbrough, still a Kansas City Royal. Edward Olivares, still a Kansas City Royal. Carlos Hernandez, still a Kansas City Royal. Salvador Perez, still a Kansas City Royal. The Royals did not make a trade today, at least not one that has been announced, with the trade deadline elapsing as of 9 minutes ago. So they are done with their business, it would appear. The sum total of their deadline, the Royals sending out Aroldis Chapman a month ago, trading Nicky Lopez over the weekend, and traded Jose Cuas earlier this week. So, no moves, no additional moves for the Royals. Would love your thoughts on that. Again, you can text 785-272-9429. And you can weigh in the YouTube comments as well. I will say this. I am of the mind that it is hard for a team like the Royals, who didn't have any obvious rental players, to really make a big splash at the deadline. Because the thing about with rental players, you're on a deadline to trade them, right? You're on a deadline to trade rental players because then you lose them for nothing. Like the Royals had a deadline to trade Aroldis Chapman, and it was today. But the deadline to trade Scott Barlow is not necessarily today. Scott Barlow's got a year of team control left. He's arbitration eligible next year. If he pitches well for the Royals down the stretch and pitches well for them next year, and the Royals are still in sell mode next year, which is highly likely, they could take another crack at trading Scott Barlow. They can do the same with Carlos Hernandez. They can do the same with Edward Olivares. I don't know. I'm going to double check and see. I don't believe Ryan Yarbrough has an option Or he has one more arbitration year. Oh, okay. Yeah, he was non-tendered. He's got one more arbitration year too. So no rentals, none on this Royals roster really, other than Aroldis Chapman. So everybody who's on the roster that the Royals failed to trade today is on the roster again under team control next year, and they could try to move them again when they are rental players next year, where you might get a little less in return, but hey, maybe they're performing better at the time, and you can maybe increase your trade return in that way. But no moves for Barlow, which had been very highly rumored. No move for Hernandez. The Royals, as you know them, look to be the Royals that will persist. There are still some moves that are being reported, as we move on here, and we'll get you updates as they kind of scroll across my Twitter timeline. I am seeing that the Miami Marlins are acquiring Josh Bell from the Cleveland Guardians. That's an interesting move. The Guardians trading Josh Bell to the Marlins, and they get Gene Segura and an infield prospect, Khalil Watson, back in return. So the Marlins have been active today. Josh Bell is going from Cleveland to the Marlins. The Marlins earlier today also acquired Jake Berger from the Chicago White Sox. Just breaking at the trade deadline, the Baltimore Orioles fortifying their starting pitching rotation as they acquired Jack Flaherty from the St. Louis Cardinals in exchange for a couple of prospects. Jack Flaherty looked like he was going to be a dude back in 2019. Then he's had some injuries and hasn't gotten back to that level since, but he's still a solid mid-rotation pitcher that you can count on to make his turn. At least this year, that's what he's been. And the Orioles, they don't have a lot of those guys, so they needed a starting pitcher, and they went out and got one in Jack Flaherty. It is so strange to see the Cardinals in sell mode. It is also funny, but it is definitely strange to see the Cardinals in sell mode. Cardinals also earlier today traded shortstop Paul DeJong to the Toronto Blue Jays. The Blue Jays found themselves in need of a rental shortstop. Bo Bichette got hurt last night, tweaked his knee. We don't know the extent of that injury, but Paul DeJong is on his way from St. Louis to Toronto. Good glove, not a great hitter, but any port in a storm. Toronto's trying to make the playoffs, and they don't know how long Bichette, one of their best players, is going to be out. So they were proactive and went and got a shortstop today. Other moves, the headline move today, Justin Verlander is going back to Houston, being traded by the Mets to the Astros in exchange for two outfield prospects for the Astros. They're including their top prospect and a first-round pick from last year, Drew Gilbert. So it's a good return for the Mets, but Justin Verlander, after just half a season on that 2-year, $83.6 million contract he signed this winter, is going back to the team he was once with as the Mets deal him to the Astros. Mets today also traded outfielder Tommy Pham to the Arizona Diamondbacks, and the Mets acquired a pair of relievers, Phil Bickford and Adam Kolarek from the Los Angeles Dodgers. I'm not sure why the Dodgers traded those two, kind of just guys in their bullpen, to the Mets, but the Mets trade a lot of pitchers, and they need warm bodies to pitch innings. So it's going to be a very strange Mets roster today, I have a feeling, for the first game of that 3-game series at Kauffman Stadium. Other moves today, another big headline was a trade that didn't get made. Eduardo Rodriguez did not waive his no-trade clause and allow a deal between the Tigers and the Dodgers to go through. The Dodgers were interested in acquiring the left-handed pitcher from the Tigers, but Rodriguez had the Dodgers on his no-trade list. He has family on the East Coast, desired to stay close to them. So that was more important to him than going to pitch for a contender, and he invoked his no-trade clause, which, good for him. That's why those things get written in the contract, so the players have a little bit of agency. And you've been in the league long enough, you get to exercise that. So good for Eduardo Rodriguez. Also good because it kind of stiffs the Dodgers, and I'm into anything that stiffs the Dodgers. So double tip of the cap as far as I'm concerned, to Eduardo Rodriguez. Other moves that were made today, All-Star Michael Lorenzen. Yeah, he was an All-Star this year. You might have missed that for the Tigers. He was successfully traded away from Detroit. He goes to the Phillies in a trade. The Padres acquired pitcher Rich Hill and first baseman G-Man Choi from the Pittsburgh Pirates earlier today. Rich Hill will be a San Diego Padre, and that will be, and I want to make sure I get the number exactly right. I'm pulling up his baseball reference page. It will, when he makes his Padres debut, it will be the 14th. Well, hold on. The 13th different major league team that Rich Hill has pitched for. One shy of the record for the most teams played for in a major league career, 14, Edwin Jackson. The Padres also acquired Garrett Cooper, another first baseman. So they've got a new platoon going over at first base, it looks like. Cooper, right-handed hitter. He comes over from the Marlins. And Choi, the left-handed hitter, coming from the Pirates. Also, the Braves and the Rockies made another trade for a reliever. The second time they've done that before the deadline. The Braves acquiring the left-hander Brad Hand from Colorado in exchange for a prospect. So not a hugely impactful trade deadline. More so, the headliners are the sellers and not the buyers. And hey, how about that? We have a trade. We do have a Royals trade to report. How about that? 17 minutes after the trade deadline, we do have a Royals trade to report. The Dodgers got their left-handed pitcher after all, folks. Ryan Yarbrough being sent from the Royals to the Dodgers. That is being reported by Mark Feinsand and Juan Toribio from MLB.com. So Ryan Yarbrough was traded just inside the deadline, and that is being reported. That is breaking news to me, so it is breaking to all of you. Ryan Yarbrough is a Los Angeles Dodger. So, congrats to Ryan Yarbrough. He gets to pitch down the stretch for a first-place team, and good on the Royals for being active on trade deadline day. We got some other sports headlines we want to get to. We got Mitch Holthus coming up in just a little bit, but a couple of more headlines that are worth touching on. First of all, this breaking news from earlier today from the Des Moines Register. The Story County Attorney's Office has filed a criminal complaint against Iowa State University quarterback Hunter Deckers, charging him with tampering with records related to the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigations probe into sports gambling. Deckers is accused of placing 26 wagers on Iowa State sporting events, including the 2021 football game against Oklahoma State, in which he was the backup quarterback and did not play. The complaint alleges that the DraftKings account controlled by Deckers completed approximately 366 mobile/online sports wagers, totaling over $2,800. Deckers, who started all 12 of the Cyclones games last season, would face permanent loss of eligibility under NCAA guidelines that prohibit athletes from wagering on their own games or other sports at their own schools. That is from Travis Hines and Randy Peterson of the Des Moines Register. This had been whispered about over the summer, and those rumors really picked up steam when Deckers was not part of the traveling party for Iowa State for the Big 12 media days. There had been, obviously, the reports about a gambling probe at Iowa State, and there were whispers that Deckers was a part of it. And apparently, he's a big part of it. And if he bet on his own team while he was playing for that team, he is never going to play another down of college football. And Iowa State's going to need a new starting quarterback. And that's kind of a big deal. Deckers obviously started all the games for them last year. Wasn't overly impressed with him as their starting quarterback. They weren't a great offensive team, but they fired their offensive coordinator, brought in a new one. Certainly you expect players to take a step forward in their second year as a full-time starter, but all that is very much up in the air and very doubtful as Hunter Deckers stands accused of betting on his own school and betting on his own football team at Iowa State, and that could result in the permanent loss of his playing eligibility. Man. I don't have a lot of sympathy. There are rules against this. Compliance tells you. Compliance makes it very clear. Don't do it. You think you can get away with it because it's on your phone? You can't. It's your phone. Compliance is dead serious about this stuff. Kind of mistake you just can't make. One more headline to get to on our 580 Sports Talk headlines. The Women's World Cup update. While you were sleeping, I almost stayed up, to watch the U.S. women's national team play Portugal. I'm glad I didn't. They didn't play very well, and they are very lucky to be moving on to the round of 16 in the Women's World Cup. They advanced by the width of a goalpost. Portugal hit the pipe with 2 minutes into injury time, would have broken a 0-0 deadlock, and would have sent the Americans home from the Women's World Cup. Instead, the ball caromed out. The game remained scoreless, and that was how it ended. So the United States, by virtue of their 0-0 draw with Portugal, does advance to the round of 16, but they are the runners-up in Group E because the Netherlands demolished Vietnam 7-0. So they, with the win and the United States draw, advance as the winner of the group. The United States are the runners-up, and they've got some issues. And if they don't get them figured out here in the next few days, because it's not talent is not the issue. It is a coaching issue. It is a tactical issue. It is they're not set up to play very well. They're not set up to maximize their talent issue. And if they don't get it solved, and not having their best midfielder, Rose Lavelle, who got a second yellow card in the match last night and is going to have to miss the round of 16 match, that's not going to help. But if they don't get it solved, they're going home, and there will be no 3-peat. And they might even be underdogs in their match against probably Sweden in the round of 16. So disappointing performance thus far for a younger U.S. women's national team. It should be said this is a transitional period for the program, but they're not playing like the number one team in the world. That's for sure. Also through the knockout stages, in addition to the Netherlands and the U.S., Japan, Spain, England, and Denmark. And one last note I will give you, it is watch list season after all, and I'm remiss not to point out the watch list nominations. 3 for K-State, 1 for KU. Cooper Beebe and KT Leviston are both up for the Outland Trophy for Best Interior Offensive Lineman. Kobe Savage of K-State, Kobe Bryant for KU are both on the Nagurski Trophy watch list. That goes to the Best Defensive Player in the country. Those are your 580 Sports Talk headlines for this Tuesday, August 1st. We'll take a break, come back with Mitch Holthus for a training camp report after this on 580 Sports Talk. 527 on 580 Sports Talk. Some more breaking news from the Major League Baseball trade deadline. The Royals got another trade in under the wire. Scott Barlow has been traded to the San Diego Padres, as is being reported in multiple outlets. We will get to more on that later on. But first, we are pleased to be joined for another edition of the Training Camp Update by the voice of the Kansas City Chiefs, Mitch Holthus. Mitch Holthus' Training Camp Report is brought to you by Hy-Vee and by Azure Credit Union. Ask Haven Byrne, Crystal Rippey, or Melissa Hunter about using the Credit Union Advantage for your home loan. Mitch, we get to talk about Patrick Mahomes today, and I have to imagine of all of the topics, all of the players that are the ones you don't tire of discussing, number 15's got to be just about the top of that list, because not just his greatness, but because of the way that he pursues it. I don't think there are, obviously we can argue where he ranks all time already, but I don't think there are many more interesting players than Patrick Mahomes when it comes to the way that he goes about his approach and the way he goes about improving on a year in, year out basis.
Yeah, and first of all, Dan, I got to say the Royals remind me of me when I was in school trying to get my term paper in. It must be in by 3:00, and at 2:59 I hand it on the teacher's desk. That's what the Royals are reminding me of with these moves. Patrick Mahomes, and I put this on Twitter, on my Twitter page during the Netflix phenomenon that was The Quarterback. It was such a wildly popular series. But I said the world is now seeing what we get to see every day in the Chiefs' kingdom. And your assertion is a very good one and a very accurate one, in that his greatness, Patrick Mahomes' greatness, goes well beyond having the greatest statistical year in NFL history, which he did last year, or having 2 Super Bowl titles and 2 MVPs in the Super Bowl and 2 MVPs in the regular season. That's what's obvious. What's not so obvious is the way that he leaves his footprint on the entire organization. I've said this. He reminds me, it's like the Chiefs have an additional head coach. They have an additional general manager. They have an additional offensive coordinator. They have an additional wide receiver, running back, and tight ends coach with Patrick Mahomes. 2 years ago, or a year ago at this time, he had to replace 170 targets in Tyreek Hill. That would fry most quarterbacks' minds. But with the head coach and with Matt Nagy coming back in as offensive, or helping out in the offense with Eric Bieniemy, they figured it out. Now he's got to replace 100 targets of Juju Smith-Schuster, who's now a Patriot. But for Mahomes, I mean, he's working on it, and he's working on it in his own unique way.
Yeah, no, I think it's really, if you look at Watson, Justin Watson, Marquez, Sky, and even KT, they're really all going into their second year within this offense. And even though they've been other places with some of those guys, it's still a whole new offense. So I think those guys, you can see that step they've taken, and then integrating the young guys in there with Justin Ross and with Rice and John Ross. I mean, we have so many young receivers that have kind of really added that value to that receiving room, and I'm excited for the competition going into training camp.
And then the tight ends group and the running back group. What about that in the receiving game?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna make Brett Veach's jobs tough. I mean, if you look at the tight end group as a whole, I mean, everybody's been making plays, running backs as well, and then getting to add Pac and Jarek in the mix. I mean, it's gonna be a heck of a offensive room, and it's gonna be a lot of competition. And I think competition brings out greatness, and that's what we're looking for.
He's amazing, and you saw how engaged he was with the defense. If you watch the Netflix quarterback series, he's a unicorn, and a unicorn more than just throwing crazy passes and throwing for 5,000 plus yards twice in his career. There's way more to Patrick Mahomes than meets the eye, and the quarterback series to me brought that home. I said he's an astronaut. He's surrounded by NASA scientists. But he's an astronaut that walks through the whole facility, encouraging people and trying to figure out a better way to do it. I said, Kirk Cousins looks like a commercial pilot. I don't know what Marcus Mariota is right now, but with Mahomes, he's a unicorn in more ways than one.
Brendan and I have discussed this about Mahomes, and listening to him talk to the media so far at this camp, that he does sound more like a coach, more like a coordinator, like he's seeing the game and his responsibilities more through that prism. Is that something that he's always had in him, or is that something that you feel like maybe is being more encouraged by Andy Reid, by Matt Nagy, as he enters this phase in his career?
To answer your question, I've seen it. He's just grown into this role over his 6 years as starting quarterback and 7 years now with the team, which seems that's mind-boggling. But I'm going to add another one to that. He could be assistant general manager of this team. His evaluation and understanding of talent, I'll get talking to him on some private discussions about personnel with this team. And it's pretty amazing how astute he is in looking at what a player can and cannot do and how he's going to accentuate that and make it be successful. Let's just take last year. What is underrated about last year was getting the running backs involved at the level that he did. And other than Travis Kelce, we know Kelce's going to be, he's tomorrow's topic, right? He's the other unicorn. But how Patrick got Fortson and Gray involved more, but most notably, Jerick McKinnon. McKinnon had touchdown receptions at 7 consecutive weeks as a running back. That's an NFL record. And 9 overall times that the McKinnon had touchdown receptions as a running back, which I believe only 5 running backs in NFL history had ever eclipsed. That's a lot to do with Mahomes because he sees a player. He sees Jerick McKinnon and goes, oh, this is what McKinnon can and cannot do, and we're going to work on his development as a player. Mahomes has that ability. It's amazing what the Chiefs have with this guy in how many ways he helps this team win more than people realize.
Mitch Holthus, the voice of the Kansas City Chiefs, is our guest. This is a training camp report here on 580 Sports Talk, as Mitch will join us throughout training camp with his insights, brought to you by Hy-Vee and Azura Credit Union. I thought Mahomes said something really interesting in a Q&A he did with Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated, talking about when he gets to the line of scrimmage, he wants to have an answer for everything, every formation, every look, every blitz package, every play that they run. He wants to know what he's going to do as soon as he takes the snap. It's something that he said that he looks at Tom Brady and there's similarities there that he wants to adapt. Does that feel like that's his challenge for this season? Because it always feels like Mahomes challenges himself in a new way every year. Is the new challenge to be that adaptable and that able to process what he's seeing as he steps to the line of scrimmage?
I think it's actually, Dan, it's what am I going to do? And I've seen him improve on this. This was his biggest improvement from 2018 to 2019. But now what teams are doing to try to throw him off or do delayed blitzes. They're going to wait and see, oh, here's the route, here's the concept, now I'm coming. Or I'll try to confuse him with an adjustment because he's so good with Mahomes to play within a play, right? We all know what he can do there. Now defenses are going to go, well, let's defend the play within a play. I think the next step for him is to say, okay, there's tendencies here in the team. They just can't switch defenses in a week to fit Patrick Mahomes. So what do they have in their play within a play defensively? Are they going to delay blitz? Do they show personnel in the delayed blitz, putting 1001, 1002, and then here they come after maybe the protection changes? That's where it goes to Calc 3 or series and differential equations because defenses are trying to become more and more complicated with him after the play starts. And I think Mahomes, his next step is to trump them even in that game. And then there'll be no answer or figure out what defenses can do after that. But if you catch my drift, it's really thinking about this beyond 3 dimensions and almost 5 dimensions.
His new backup quarterback potentially this year is Blaine Gabbert. Chad Henne retired after some solid years of service and some great memories with the Chiefs. And now Blaine Gabbert is in camp and vying to be the backup quarterback to Mahomes. And Gabbert comes from Tampa Bay, where he backed up Tom Brady the last 3 years. How much of a benefit is that experienced backup presence for this team? And how much might it benefit Mahomes to be able to pick the brain of a guy who was picking Brady's brain the last 3 years?
That's the humility of Patrick Mahomes. He doesn't ever figure out or think I've got this all figured out. Like, he will extract everything he can out of Blaine Gabbert. Now, we're not playing the game we play during the regular season, which is, the nugget of the night. But to me, one of the most fun nuggets of Blaine Gabbert, and you might know this, he was the starting quarterback in Andy Reid's first game as head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs when Gabbert was the quarterback for the Jaguars. In Coach's first win as Chiefs head coach in a 28-2 glorious victory back in 2013. There's more to Gabbert than I thought there was. From a standpoint of ability, he's got a rocket arm. The ball comes out fast. So the question is, can he do what Chad Henne, one, be part of that NASA scientist group that the Chiefs have that includes Matt Nagy and Andy Reid and David Girardi? Well, the backup quarterback's involved in those discussions. That's one. Is he smart enough and is he humble enough to do it? And the answer is yes, at least what I've seen so far. The second is, could Blaine Gabbert, who's never played in a playoff game in his life, and he came into the league in 2011, could he do what Chad Henne did against Cleveland in 2020, and that is win the game at the end, or go 98 yards for a touchdown against Jacksonville in last year's divisional playoff game? We don't know that. But what I've seen this spring and summer and so far in camp is he's capable. But part of his 98-yard drive, because remember Pacheco's 39-yard run was a big piece of Chad Henne's 98-yard drive in the victory over Jacksonville, is the fact that you might get a 60 or 70-yard play from Gabbert that's not necessarily designed to be so. Why? The ball comes out fast. It's usually on target. And if it hits the sky more on target at 20 yards, he might be able to take off and run for 40 more and a touchdown. That's what I'm seeing from Blaine Gabbert. There's more talent here than I thought there was. And two, I'm seeing that same kind of physical mental connection with him and Mahomes that I saw with Henne and Mahomes. So Gabbert's comfortable in that role. He's had good reps so far in camp, good reps so far in the mini camps and OTAs. And I think the Chiefs have been able to replace Henne in a good way with Blaine Gabbert.
Last question for Mitch Holthus, the voice of the Kansas City Chiefs, joining us here on 580 Sports Talk. A lot was made about Mahomes having the receivers to sort of a training camp, sort of a prelude to training camp, working out with some of his receivers this summer. He worked out some of the draft prospects at receiver as well. Do you think that that has enabled Mahomes to be in a place as he comes to camp, kind of tying back to what we talked about yesterday with the desire to be prepared to get out to a fast start? Do you think that the work in the offseason that Mahomes has added over time helps him be more equipped to start seasons fast with this group of receivers?
Go back to the very beginning of this discussion, Dan, because I said he's like a pseudo head coach. Other quarterbacks will say, hey, let's run routes together and get over at Topeka West and, work together. Mahomes approaches his own OTAs before we start OTAs, and he actually approaches it as if Andy Reid was there, meaning he's working with these guys mentally and physically, but coaching them up. And it's not just timing. It's also bonding. He's working on the psychological part of his receiving core before they even get started. I've seen it work with Richie James. I'm going to get into Richie James here in 2 weeks because week 3 thesis will be the potential unseen stars or the unsung heroes. And right now, the work that Mahomes has done with Richie James in specific could bear fruit. But that's just one example to answer your question is they're off and running before anybody's off and running because Mahomes has his own OTAs and he approaches it like a team would approach OTAs. But that's just the acumen of Patrick Mahomes and why he is truly special in an elite class, maybe top 3 or 5 in the history of the league, in the way he approaches it. I think Joe Montana might be in that group. I'm trying to think who else. Maybe Brady, but actually Mahomes can do some things Brady didn't do. But this is a rare dude, man. This is a rare cat the Chiefs have, and it's a lot of fun to be around him.
Mitch Holthus, the voice of the Kansas City Chiefs, joining us for a training camp report here on 580 Sports Talk. These reports brought to you by Hy-Vee and by Azura Credit Union. Ask Haven Byrne, Crystal Rippey, or Melissa Hunter about using the Credit Union Advantage for your home loan. Mitch, we appreciate the time as always, and tomorrow we'll talk about, you said, the other unicorn on offense.
Well, we're going to continue our chiseling of the WIBW Mount Rushmore Monument of Chiefs Kingdom in this recent surge. And so we're going to Travis Kelce tomorrow, the third face on the monument. First is Andy Reid. Second is Patrick Mahomes. Third, obviously, is Travis Kelce, a unicorn in and of himself.
I think there are a lot of listeners who would say your face would be fourth on that Mount Rushmore of the Chiefs kingdom, Mitch.
Well, they broke the hammer. It was like using a little hammer like they used in Shawshank with the brain. So we're chiseling away here, buddy. We're chiseling away.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Mitch. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks.
That is Mitch Holthus. I hung up on myself, not on Mitch there. That is Mitch Holthus. That is a training camp report here on 580 Sports Talk. Always love talking to Mitch. Mitch talking about Patrick Mahomes. I'm sure there are many of you, and I would be inclined to agree with you. That's a goat talking about a goat, as far as I'm concerned. We're going to take a break here on 580 Sports Talk. We'll come back, update you on those trades the Royals made just before the Major League Baseball trade deadline. Ryan Yarbrough and Scott Barlow both shipped out, headed to the NL West. We'll tell you who the Royals are getting back in return when we come back on 580 Sports Talk. .546 here on 580 Sports Talk. We're coming down the home stretch of this Tuesday edition of the program. I'm Dan. Brendan's on vacation, back next week. Kyle's across the glass. We'll have some overtime coming your way in just a little bit between 6 and 6:30. We'll hear Matt Derrick, our Chiefs insider, his conversation with Jake and Fulton on Mic'd Up earlier today. Speaking of the Chiefs, our thanks again to the great Mitch Holthus for joining us for our training camp report. If you missed that, want to relive that or any part of our programs today and every day, check out the podcast page online at 580wibw.com. There is a podcast tab at the top of the page. Hover over that, click on 580 Sports Talk, and you can hear the show hour by hour every single day. You can also check out the YouTube archives at our YouTube page, youtube.com/@sportson580, where we are at 306 subscribers. We did it. We did it. By we, I mean me. I did that. Me, baby. M-E, me. I did that. I got us over 300 subscribers. Which there was a great text about that in the 785. Congrats to Dan and Dan alone for this great accomplishment. A true one-man show, the hero Topeka needs, #300. Thank you. Thank you. I am humbled and honored to have eclipsed the 300 subscriber threshold. And I will get to lord that over Brendan a little bit, and that will be kind of fun. Anyway, appreciate all of you for tuning in today, for subscribing, for hanging out in the YouTube comments, and for being a part of 580 Sports Talk. Royals did get 2 trades just snuck inside the wire, and they were able to get a return for both Ryan Yarbrough and Scott Barlow. We'll start with the Yarbrough trade first. That was reported first. Yarbrough is on his way to the Dodgers. The Dodgers sending 2 prospects over in return. One of them is right-handed infielder Devin Mann, who's currently at AAA for the Dodgers. He was the 29th ranked prospect in the Dodgers system, according to MLB Pipeline. Having a big year at AAA Oklahoma City, hitting .307 with a .402 on base and a .541 slugging percentage, 33 doubles, 14 home runs, and a couple of stolen bases. He is 6'2", 180 pounds, can play all over the infield, and is the kind of player that the Dodgers always seem to develop, guys who are really good college players, and then they end up making their big league debuts in the mid-20s and in their mid-20s and are solid major league players. Matt Beattie, who the Royals have on their active rosters, kind of another example of a player just like that for the Dodgers. And Devin Mann might be next in line, but if he does make the majors, it's going to be as a Royal because he is part of the return for Ryan Yarbrough. The other player the Royals are getting back is Derlin Figueroa. He is a 19-year-old shortstop out of the Dominican who is currently playing in the complex leagues for the Dodgers, a left-handed hitter, 19 years of age, hitting .237 with a .372 on base, a .748 OPS in 31 games in the Arizona Complex League. So not among the Dodgers' top 30, but that doesn't mean he's not a prospect, just means the Dodgers have a lot of prospects. He will probably, I guess I won't want to assume, but there's a decent chance he'll end up a top 30 Royals prospect by the time the lists are all redone following the trade deadline. So that's the return for Ryan Yarbrough. I like it. For Ryan Yarbrough, absolutely. Absolutely. That's the guy you pick up for $3 million and you turn him into somebody in Devin Mann who's probably going to play in the major leagues and a high ceiling lottery ticket prospect, 19-year-old who's having some success in his first exposure to the United States. I like that. I like that trade. That's solid. The extent of the return for Scott Barlow is not yet known. Scott Barlow was traded to the San Diego Padres, and among the players coming back in the Royals' direction is Henry Williams, a right-handed pitcher out of Duke, who was a third-round pick of the Padres in 2022. Might have been a higher draft pick, but had Tommy John surgery last year. So he's just now getting back onto a mound. So it's not really right to look at his stats this year at low A Lake Elsinore in the California League. The fact that he's taking the ball and pitching every day is really what you're looking at here. Now, he's made 12 starts, 42 and a third innings, 40 strikeouts, 21 walks, an ERA in the high fives. But when you're coming back from Tommy John surgery and it's your first year of professional baseball, the numbers are kind of not the important thing. It's showing health and ramping your stuff back up. And Henry Williams was thought to have pretty good stuff coming out of Duke. Would have been, again, a higher draft pick if not for the Tommy John surgery. He was the 10th ranked prospect in the Padres system coming into this year, according to MLB Pipeline, was graded a 55 fastball, 55 slider on the 80 scale. a 6'5" big kid, room to grow, room to maybe add some velocity if he gets back healthy. That is the kind of prospect I have been wanting the Royals to target in their returns. Less of the big league ready, less of the post-height prospect, more of the guys with ceiling. And Henry Williams is a ceiling prospect and will surely be a top 10 Royals prospect whenever those lists are redone. That is reportedly not the entire return for Scott Barlow, but the rest of it is not known yet, has not been reported. We'll keep an eye on it. If we know the rest of it by the time we're done here today, we'll pass it along. But I will give J.J. Piccolo the credit where it is due. I think that's good return for Scott Barlow. I think what they were able to get for Ryan Yarbrough was really good business. I think in trading two of the offseason free agent signings on the mound in Chapman and Yarbrough, that is the kind of business the Royals should be doing, the kind of moves the Royals should be looking to make when they're in this rebuilding cycle. If you can find a veteran and sign them to a one-year deal and then flip them for prospects by the trade deadline, you have helped the future of your team. You have been forward-thinking. You've been smart about it. And so I think J.J. Piccolo came out okay at this trade deadline. Still don't love the Nicky Lopez for Taylor Hearn trade. Still don't love what it says about the Royals' preference for close to the major league prospects. But every other move the Royals made, Jose Cuas for Nelson Velasquez, Ryan Yarbrough for prospects, and Scott Barlow for prospects, I think it's a thumbs up for me. I do. I think it's a thumbs up at the trade deadline for the Kansas City Royals, which I did not expect I would be giving even an hour ago. But I will give the thumbs up for what the Royals accomplished at this trade deadline. We got one more break. The final word next on 580 Sports Talk.
nothing. In conclusion, you better wrap it up.
Wrapping up this edition of 580 Sports Talk. We're going to have to do it quick because we're up against the clock. But my final word today is, again, a thumbs up for J.J. Piccolo being able to trade Ryan Yarbrough and Scott Barlow for what looks like decent return at the trade deadline. And a thumbs down for George Kliavkoff, who brought his ADs and presidents at the Pac-12 streaming numbers and begged him to sell subscriptions for him today. And that is not going to work out. That'll do it for the show today. We'll be back tomorrow. We got overtime coming up next. This is 580 Sports Talk. For Kyle, I'm Dan. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.